My name is Leela. I'm 16 and I live in Waco, Texas. People think it's just some flat little town with churches and barbed wire fences, but to me, it's more like a collection of memories wrapped in OLD silence, the kind that creeps through the walls when everyone's pretending things are fine. Things haven't been fine for a long time. Not since Mom got remarried. Not since Grandpa Joe started coughing blood and no one seemed to care. Back when it was just me, Mom, and Grandpa, life felt quieter, but not so dark. Grandpa used to read to me from these weird old books full of ciphers and spy stuff, and I'd ask if it was real and he'd smile that crooked smile of his and say nothing at all. I think now he was preparing me, not just for puzzles, but for the way people hide things behind words. When Mom married Ron, everything got stiff. Our living room that used to have mismatched pillows and half-drank coffee mugs suddenly smelled like cologne and bleach. Ron walked around like he owned the place, which maybe he did now in a way since Mom changed the title on the house. I wasn't supposed to know that, but I overheard them arguing one night while they thought I was asleep. He said something about making things official, and her voice got sharp like it does when she's trying to control something slipping. The first thing they did was push Grandpa into the guest room. Said he needed more space, which was stupid because his room had always been his space. Then one morning they told me he had to go to a facility, a care home. They said it was best for him since he was getting forgetful. But Grandpa wasn't forgetful. He was tired. He was sick. But his mind was like a trap, tight and ready. I remember crying in my room with my headphones on so no one would hear. Not because he was leaving, but because I didn't know how to stop it. Mom said I could still visit, but her eyes were doing that thing where they avoid mine, and I knew it wasn't going to be as simple as that. The place they sent him to was called Green Pines Care Center. It was anything but green. The paint on the sign was chipped, and the front gate buzzed like a bad motel. Inside it smelled like medicine and microwaved food. A nurse named Carla walked me down the hallway and kept smiling to White like she was trying to sell me something. Grandpa's room was at the end. He was sitting in a plastic chair staring at the wall. His eyes flicked toward me. His face didn't change. When I sat down, he didn't speak right away. Then he whispered with this raspy voice I almost didn't recognize. He said, "Find the notebook. Top shelf. Nothing else." I looked around like maybe someone had heard, but the nurse was already gone. That night, I snuck into his old room. Ron had turned it into a workout space, but the shelves were still there. I climbed up on the desk and felt along the top. There was dust, and then something solid. A notebook, black. Deep on the inside was a key and a folded paper that looked like it had been handled 100 times. I didn't open it there. I stuffed it into my hoodie and slipped out. Before anyone saw a dot in my closet under a blanket, I read the whole thing. It was a legal document, a trust, written in this complicated language I didn't understand completely, but one thing was clear. Grandpa had made me the beneficiary of all his accounts, all of them. Not Mom, not Ron, me. The date on it was just after Mom got married, almost like he knew what was coming. There was also a letter, handwritten and uneven. He said, "If you're reading this, it means they got what they wanted, but I still got what I needed. Protect yourself. They'll come after it when they find out." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next day at school, I kept imagining Ron tearing apart my room or Mom pretending to be sweet while she searched for something she wasn't supposed to have. But nothing happened. For weeks, I visited Grandpa once a week after school. He started looking worse. They kept saying it was just his condition. But I saw the bruises on his arm. I saw how his hands shook more than they used to. One afternoon, he wouldn't wake up. The nurse said he was sedated for pain, but his mouth was dry and there was this weird red ring around his lips like he'd been sick and no one cleaned it. When I asked what they gave him, the nurse just said standard medication protocol. I wanted to scream. I didn't. I went home and wrote everything down. It was a month later that Grandpa died. I wasn't there. They said it was in his sleep. But I don't believe that. I think someone made sure he wouldn't say anything else. Maybe he knew too much. Maybe the notebook scared them. Maybe Mom and Ron had finally figured out he'd locked them out. At the funeral, Mom cried like she'd just lost her best friend. But her makeup was perfect and her nails were done in pale pink like she'd be. In planning the outfit, Ron stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders like some bodyguard at a crime scene. I just sat in the back and stared at the casket. I didn't cry. Not then. Not until that night when I opened the notebook again and read the part I hadn't seen before. There was a number, a lawyer. I called him the next morning. His voice was quiet and firm, and he asked if I had the original document. I said yes. He told me to meet him the following Monday. He had already received a copy from Grandpa weeks before he passed. My copy just confirmed it. At the will reading, Mom brought her sunglasses and acted like a widow even though Grandpa was never hers to lose. The lawyer handed out envelopes. Mine was thick. Hers was 1 page. Ron didn't get one at all. She opened it and her face went pale. Not just surprised pale, but drained. As if someone had turned off the blood in her body. She looked at the lawyer and asked what kind of joke this was. He said it wasn't a joke. That Grandpa had revoked her medical proxy, that he'd changed the trust after she tried to admit him to a facility under forged documents. I watched her blink like the room was spinning. Ron leaned forward and said something about contesting it, but the lawyer cut him off. He said all the documents had already been verified by the court, that the signatures were clean, that I was the sole trustee. I didn't say anything. I just folded the paper and put it back in my bag. I walked out while they were still sitting there, out into the sun. The air felt different, like someone had handed me a new skin. That night, I sat on my bed holding the notebook. Grandpa didn't make it out of that place, but he made sure the truth did. That was how he won. I stared at the notebook for hours that night. My room was quiet except for the old fan rattling in the window, and every time it clicked, I jumped a little. I kept thinking someone was going to come storming through the door. Ron maybe. Or Mom with her voice all trembling like I'd betrayed her. But the house was silent to silent. The notebook didn't just have legal things. On the last few pages, Grandpa had written these strange notes, dates, names, places, like a journal, but messier. He'd circled a few of them in red pen. One entry said May 18th, Garden Oaks, room 214, meds doubled. Another just said Nurse Carla. Don't trust. I didn't know what to do with it all. For 2 days I kept to myself. At school I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't even eat lunch. I kept going over what the lawyer said. Verified, irrevocable, sole trustee. I Googled all of it just to make sure it meant what I thought it meant. It did. I had control, not just of Grandpa's money but of his whole estate, which meant if I wanted to investigate what happened to him, no one could stop me. On the 3rd night, I walked into the kitchen and found Ron at the table. His hands were folded and his face was calm, but in a weird way like he'd practiced it. In the mirror, Mom wasn't there. He asked if I had a minute. I didn't say anything. I just leaned against the wall and waited. He said he understood that I was grieving and that this whole situation was complicated, but that I should know family always works better together. I asked him what he wanted. He smiled like that was rude. He said he and Mom just thought maybe I wasn't ready to handle big financial decisions on my own and that if I let them help we could all benefit. I walked away without a word, went straight to my room and locked the door. The next morning, Mom acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes. I didn't eat them. By the weekend, I knew I had to go back to Green Pines. Even if Grandpa was gone, something in me said there was more there, something buried. I waited until Saturday afternoon and told Mom I was going to the library. She barely looked up from her phone. I took the bus across town and walked the last few blocks in the heat. The front gate was buzzing like always. Inside, the walls smelled worse than before. Like bleach trying to cover something rotten. I told The front desk, I was here to pick up my grandfather's belongings. The nurse gave me a plastic bag with his glasses and one slipper. No notebooks, no papers, nothing else. I asked about the rest of his things and she said someone must have already cleared them. I knew that was a lie. I waited until she turned her back, then I slipped down the hallway. Room 214 was at the end, just like I remembered. The door was unlocked. The bed was empty, but the sheets were still wrinkled like someone had just gotten up. There was a medicine cart parked near the doorway and a clipboard resting on top. I grabbed it and flipped through. Half the words were shorthand I didn't understand. But I saw Grandpa's name and a long list of medications. Some were crossed out, some were underlined. And at the bottom was a signature that didn't look familiar. I heard footsteps coming and I panicked. I shoved the clipboard under my hoodie and slipped out through the emergency exit. The alarm beeped once, then stopped. I ran all the way to the corner and didn't stop until I saw the gas station. Back in my room, I studied the clipboard for hours. I compared the handwriting on the signature to Grandpa's. It wasn't his. Then I went online and looked up the medications. 2 of them were only supposed to be used in late-stage sedation. The dosages were way too high. Someone had been drugging him on purpose. I didn't know what to do with that kind of information. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a doctor. I was just some girl with a dead grandpa and a notebook full of warnings. But I couldn't ignore it. The next day at school, I printed out everything. The trust document, the notes from the notebook, copies of the medication list. I made a folder and put it in the bottom of my locker, just in case. That night when I got home, Mom was crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the quiet kind where her face is blank and her hands are shaking. I didn't ask why. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but then looked away. I think she knew what I found. I locked my door and checked the drawer where I kept Grandpa's notebook. It was gone. My stomach flipped. I tore apart the whole room. Nothing. It was always in the same spot. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat on my bed and tried to breathe. That night I didn't sleep. I listened for sounds in the hallway. I kept the light on. The next morning, Mom made eggs. She asked if I was okay. Her voice was too soft to control. I nodded and told her I had a project to work on after school. She said to be home before dark. I didn't go to school. I took the bus to the lawyer's office. I had the documents in my bag. I told the receptionist I needed to speak to him urgently. When he came out, he looked surprised to see me. I showed him the list from the care home. I told him I thought someone had killed my grandfather. He didn't dismiss me. He just asked if I still had the original notebook. I told him it was stolen. He asked if anyone else had access. I said probably. Then he handed me a business card. It had another name on it, a private investigator. That afternoon, I met the woman from the card. Her name was Dana. She had short black hair and eyes that didn't blink much. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt, just took notes. At the end, she asked if I could get her a copy of the original will. I said I had it in my locker. She said, good, keep it safe. She said she'd start digging. When I got home that night, Mom wasn't there. Neither was Ron. The house felt weirdly hollow. I went to my room and checked every drawer again. Then I found it, the notebook, under my mattress. But something was different. The pages had been moved. A few were missing, torn out. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just took out my phone and started taking pictures of every single page that was left. 2 days later, Dana called. She said I needed to come to her office. She found something. When I got there, she had this small stack of documents. One of them was an email from Ron, sent to the care home a month before Grandpa died. It mentioned increasing dosages and mentioned payment. Another was a copy of a forged medical report. With Mom's signature, I stared at the pages and felt like my skin was on fire. Dana looked at me and said, this isn't just fraud. This is elder abuse. Maybe more. I asked what happens now. She said it depends on how far I want to go. I said all the way. I said all the way and I meant it, but the minute those words left my mouth, I felt my throat tighten like someone was squeezing it from inside. Dana nodded once like she expected the answer, but I could tell from the way she tapped her pen she also knew what it meant. This wasn't going to be some quiet court filing. It was going to get loud. She told me to go home and lay low, not to confront them, not to mention the investigation. She'd start gathering everything and file a formal report with the state first, then federal if needed. She said with the documents we had and the timing of Grandpa's death, there was already enough smoke. She just needed to find the fire. I nodded, but inside my chest was already burning. I wasn't scared exactly, just charged, like a wire humming, with electricity, and nowhere to go. The walk home was slow. Every person on the street looked suspicious to me. I passed our mailbox and hesitated. Then I opened it. Inside was a white envelope with no return address. My name was on it, just Leeler. No last name, no stamp. I took it out with my fingers, barely touching the corners like it might bite. I waited until I got inside and locked my bedroom door before I opened it. The paper inside was plain, block letters, cut from magazines like a cheap crime movie. Stop digging. That was all it said. I sat there staring at it for a long time. My first thought was Ron. My second was Mom. My third was someone else. Someone inside the care home. Maybe Carla. Maybe the doctor whose signature didn't match. Maybe all of them together. I didn't call Dana right away. I hid the note behind the loose board in my closet with the rest of the documents. I had a hiding place there now. It made me feel less exposed. Mom knocked on my door around 7, said dinner was ready. I told her I wasn't hungry. She stood there for a few seconds like she wanted to say something else, but didn't. Then her footsteps faded. That night I couldn't sleep again. Every sound made me jump. A car passing. The creak of the pipes. At one point I got up and pushed my dresser in front of the door just in case. At school the next morning, I went straight to my locker. The folder was still there. I flipped through it fast just to make sure. All the pages were intact. I carried it around with me all day. I didn't even go to class. I sat in the back corner of the library and read every single word again like, maybe I missed something. After school, Dana called. She said she'd confirmed the forged documents were filed under a doctor who had lost their license 2 years ago. The clinic listed didn't exist. She also found a witness, a former nurse from Green Pines who got fired 3 months ago for asking too many questions. Her name was Joy. Joy agreed to meet us that night at a diner near the highway. She was older than I expected, probably in her late 40s. She looked tired. Her hands shook a little as she stirred her coffee. She told us Grandpa wasn't the only one. She said Green Pines had a pattern. Patients with full estates. No family that checked in often. Or family that wanted them quiet. She said there were drugs that weren't recorded. Chart changes made after death. She said they fired her when she asked why one patient was suddenly put on double dosage with no diagnosis change. Dana asked if she'd testify. Joy said she'd think about it. She didn't sound convinced. When we left the diner, Dana said if Joy backed out, we'd need hard proof, more than what we already had. That meant going back to Green Pines. I didn't want to, not because I was afraid, but because the place made my skin crawl. Still, I said yes. That night, I told Mom I was going to a sleepover. She didn't question it. She barely looked up from the sink. I packed a flashlight, a hoodie, and a burner phone Dana gave me. She met me in her car a block away. We drove in silence. She parked around the corner and handed me a laminated badge, temporary access tag from a cleaning company she knew. It wasn't legal. She told me not to get caught. We slipped in through the back. The security camera above the door was tilted, either broken or someone made it look that way. The hallway lights flickered. I tried not to breathe too loud. We got to the records room. Dana picked the lock in under a minute. Inside were rows of file cabinets, all alphabetical. We found Grandpa's folder and took photos of every page. There were 2 versions of the medication log, one typed, one handwritten. The typed one was clean. The handwritten one showed for days with sudden increases and explained, I found a post-it note in the back with 2 initials. RS, I didn't recognize them. We took pictures of 2 other files while we were there. People Grandpa used to talk about. Mrs. Lewis, Mr. Urchin. Both had weird spikes in their charts to. Dana said we had enough to go to the authorities. We slipped back out the same way we came in. My hands were shaking by the time we reached the car. The next morning before school I got a text from Dana. Someone broke into her office. Nothing stolen, just a warning. That afternoon I went to the police. I brought the folder. I asked to speak to someone in investigations. A detective named Hartley met me. He had a calm voice to calm. He listened to everything and took the folder and said they'd look into it. When I told Dana, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said we needed to be careful. Sometimes people like Hartley get told to delay things. Still, or worse, I didn't go home that night. I stayed at Dana's place. She had a spare room. We didn't sleep much. She printed out backup copies of everything and put them in a box in her trunk. By the next day, everything felt different, like we were being watched. I saw the same black car parked outside school 2 mornings in a row. Dana said not to panic, but also not to ignore it. Then Joy called. Her voice was shaking. She said someone came to her apartment, left a note on her door. It said the same thing mine did. Stop digging. That night Dana said it was time to go public. Go in public sounded like a big phrase until it actually happened. Dana said we had 2 options. One was the slow way. File paperwork, keep building the case, and pray it didn't get buried by someone in a suit with a quiet handshake. The other way was louder, riskier. We put everything out there and let the pressure force action. I chose loud. That night we went to a local reporter. Her name was Macy and she'd already covered a couple stories about shady care homes, so Dana said she was one of the few who wouldn't flinch. Macy looked at me like she'd already figured out more than I said. I liked her immediately. She brought a little recorder and let me talk. Just talk. Everything from the notebook to the forged meds to the warning notes to the night we snuck into Green Pines. Dana backed it all with documents. Macy asked if I wanted my name used. I said yes. If I didn't own this now, it would never end. The story went live the next morning. I didn't even go to school. Dana and I watched it together in her kitchen with cold toast on the table and both our phones buzzing nonstop. The headline was simple. Teen inherits estate exposes abuse at local care home. The fallout hit fast. That same day Green Pine shut down temporarily. They called it an internal audit. But by afternoon there were already protesters outside the gate. People who had family there. Some of them crying. Some of them screaming. I saw a woman throw a bottle at the sign. Mom didn't call me. Not that day. Not the next. But Ron did. Block number. I answered out of instinct. His voice was low like he thought someone might be listening. He told me I didn't know what I was messing with. I hung up. The police finally called too. This time not Detective Hartley. A woman. Detective Alvarez. She asked to meet me and Dana. She said there were new developments. We met at a little cafe with security cameras on every corner. Alvarez wore a leather jacket and had tired eyes. She brought a folder. Inside were new reports. Green Pines had been investigated 5 years ago, closed for 6 months, then suddenly cleared. The report had a familiar name. RS, the initials from the post-it. It stood for Raymond Sutter, a private consultant hired to clean up elder care facilities. He used to be a nurse, lost his license in another state. Then he started a consulting firm. Alvarez said Sutter was tied to at least 4 other care homes, all with similar complaints. 3 settled out of court, 1 fire. No one rested. I asked what happens now. She said her team was opening a full investigation, that she'd already secured a warrant for Green Pines and for Sutter's office. Dana looked relieved, but only a little. She asked what about Ron and my mother. Alvarez said she couldn't promise anything yet, but the forged medical papers and financial manipulation were serious. If the signatures matched, and the money trail was clear they'd be brought in. After that, things moved fast. Reporters came to my school. My teachers acted like they didn't know what to say. One of them told me I was brave. Another told me to stay focused on my assignments, like math homework mattered now. That Friday, I got a call from Joy. Her voice sounded steadier. She said she was ready to testify, that she had kept her own file of notes and records just in case. She said she couldn't sleep knowing she'd let it go this long. I told her it wasn't her fault. She thanked me, said my grandfather would have been proud. I cried after that. The first real cry since he died, the kind that makes your ribs ache. 2 days later, they arrested Sutter. It was on the news. He looked calm in the photos, sunglasses on, tucked shirt, like he still thought he was smarter than everyone else. But the list of charges was long, and growing. Then came the subpoena for Mom and Ron. Dana read it over with me. Fraud, conspiracy, financial exploitation. Alvarez said it might not stick, but it was a start. When Mom finally called me, she was crying, real tears this time, or maybe just tired ones. She asked how I could do this to her. I said I didn't do anything, I just stopped pretending. She hung up. The night before their court date, I couldn't sleep again. I opened the notebook one last time. I read every line until the ink felt like it was etched into my eyes. Then I put it in a lockbox with the other originals and gave Dana the key. Court was strange. Not like on TV, slower, quieter. The lawyers talked in circles. Ron looked bored. Mom looked like someone had unplugged her. When they played the audio of Joy's statement, Mom started shaking. When the signature comparisons came out, Ron left the room. They didn't go to jail that day, but the judge froze their assets. Opened up full discovery. Dana said that was as good as we could ask for now. The rest would come. When we walked out of the building, there were reporters again. One asked if I had anything to say. I looked into the camera and said my grandfather wasn't just some old man in a chair. He was a human being, and he deserved to be treated like one. That night, I sat on my bed with the window open. The air was warm. The neighborhood was quiet. I thought about Grandpa's stories, about the spy books and the riddles and the way he used to say things without saying them. I think he knew the world wouldn't protect him, so he left behind everything he could to protect me, and I used it. But it wasn't over. Dana said there were still hearings ahead, that the other families might come forward now, that Green Pines wasn't the only place like this, that the fight was just beginning, and I wasn't done either. The fight was just beginning, but I didn't know how deep it would go until the letters started arriving. At first, I thought they were fan mail or maybe more threats, but they weren't either. They were from families, people I had never met, sons, daughters, cousins, all saying the same thing. Their parents or grandparents had been in Green Pines too. Some had died. Some were still there, but barely able to speak anymore. One letter said my story made them dig up old paperwork. Another said they found medication in their father's drawer that wasn't prescribed by any listed doctor. They asked what to do, who to call. If I had more answers, I kept every single letter, stacked them in a show box, and slid it under my bed. I didn't know what to say to them yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore them. Dana said this is what happens when someone speaks up. People come out of the dark. People start hoping again. I went back to school the next week. Everyone looked at me differently. Not mean, just cautious. Like I might break or bite or both. A couple of kids I didn't even know gave me these nods like we were on the same team. One girl left a folded paper on my desk that just said thank you and nothing else. But not everyone was grateful. A boy from my science class said maybe Grandpa was just old and sick, and that not everything is a conspiracy. I didn't even answer him. I just stared until he looked away. I didn't have energy for that kind of small mind. Dana set up a meeting between me and a group of lawyers who represented other families. They wanted to organize a joint civil case, a class action. I didn't understand all of it, but I said I'd be part of it. I wasn't just doing this for Grandpa anymore. I was doing it for all of them, all the ones who didn't have notebooks or secret trusts or a granddaughter who refused to let go. One night, while I was sitting in Dana's apartment going over paperwork, she handed me a file. It was Grandpa's military records. I didn't even know she had them. He served overseas years before I was born. Communications division, top security clearance. She said he might have learned more about surveillance and record keeping than he ever let on. That made me wonder, if he left the notebook behind, what else had he? Danny went home and tore through his old room. Again, Ron hadn't cleaned everything. The ceiling vent was dusty and loose. I got a chair and reached inside. There was a plastic container taped to the back edge. Inside were 2 flash drives and an envelope. The flash drives were encrypted. I didn't know the password, but the envelope had a handwritten note in his crooked scrawl. Same eyes, same hands, same quiet. I brought the drives to Dana. She took them to a tech contact of hers. It took 2 days, but they cracked one of them. Inside were video clips, hidden camera footage, dates, times, locations, a nurse giving a patient pills and then switching the chart, a man signing papers while clearly drugged, someone wheeling out a body in the middle of the night with no record in the logbook. The clips were grainy, some hard to watch, but they were real. Dana said this changed everything. It wasn't just paperwork now, it was visual proof. Evidence of intentional harm. She took the clips to Detective Alvarez. Within 2 days, Alvarez called back. She said a grand jury was being formed. Multiple indictments were pending. The case was officially moving forward at the state level. Then the real storm came. Green Pines wasn't operating alone. That's what Alvarez told us. It was part of a larger chain, a group of care homes under one parent company. That company had investors, legal teams, lobbyists. They kept things quiet for years by buying silence and settling fast. But they hadn't planned on someone like Grandpa, and they definitely hadn't planned on someone like me. Macy, the reporter, published a follow-up, this time naming the parent company. The story went viral. National outlets picked it up. There were interviews, talk shows. I got a request to fly to New York and speak on a panel. Dana said it might help the case. I said yes. Before we left, Ron showed up at Dana's apartment. He knocked like he owned the place. Dana answered the door, but didn't let him in. He looked thinner, sweatier. He said he needed to talk to me, said he was sorry, that he didn't know what Sutter was really doing, that he just wanted what was best for Mom and me. I asked him why he forged the medical forms. He said it was complicated, that Mom was in debt, that the house was about to be foreclosed, that Grandpa's accounts were the only way out. I didn't say anything. I just closed the door, let him talk to the wood. The next morning we flew to New York. It was my first time on a plane. My ears popped and my stomach flipped, but I kept thinking about Grandpa. What he would have said if he saw me on a news set in a blazer with people asking questions like I was some kind of expert. The interview was live. They asked about the investigation, about my age, about how it felt to take down something so big. I told them I didn't take it down. I just refused to let it stay hidden. When we flew back home, I found Mom sitting on the porch. She looked small. Her eyes were puffy like she hadn't slept. She said she was sorry, that she let fear twist her, that she didn't know how to stop. Once it started, I asked her if she ever actually believed Grandpa needed that care home. She said no. Then she left. I haven't seen her since. Weeks passed. The hearings began. Sutter pled not guilty. His lawyers tried to dismiss the evidence, said the video footage was fake, said the medication changes were normal, said the patients were all very old and probably confused. But the jury didn't buy it. Neither did the judge. He was denied bail. The class action lawsuit moved forward. Over 40 families signed on. I met some of them at the courthouse. A man hugged me and told me his mother died a week after being transferred to Green Pines. Another woman said she watched her father slip away day by day. and thought it was just dementia. Now, she wasn't sure. Dana said it was the biggest case of its kind in the state in over a decade. At school, people started treating me normal again. I guess the cameras got boring. I liked it better that way. I didn't want to be the girl who took down the care home. I just wanted to be Leela, the girl who used to read spy books with her grandpa in a room full of quiet and dust. I still have the notebook and the flash drive and all the letters. Every once in a while I open them just to remind myself that he was right, that being quiet doesn't mean being weak, and that the truth has its own kind of voice. I didn't think the notebook would open more doors, but it did. A month after the hearing started, I got a package. No return address, just my name again. Inside was a thin book bound with twine and a note that said, "Ask the library." That was all. I opened the book and realized it was a ledger, names, dates, codes. Some were crossed out. Others had small marks next to them. One name jumped out. Carlinda P. I remembered it from Grandpa's notebook. He had circled it once with red ink and wrote "Protect her" right next to it. I showed Dana. She flipped through the pages without speaking, then pulled out her laptop. Carlinda P. was Carlinda Parrish. She used to run a home health nonprofit before it shut down 6 years ago after an anonymous complaint. She vanished from the system after that. No phone, no address, no trace. But the book had more names. Some matched employees from Green Pines, others didn't. Dana said this wasn't just about Green Pines anymore. That this ledger looked like a network. She didn't want to say the word ring, but we both felt it. She called Alvarez. We met in a secured conference room this time. Alvarez looked more tired than usual but focused. She took photos of every page, said she'd loop in federal investigators, said this thing had legs. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I was about to learn. 2 days later, Dana's car was broken into. Nothing taken. Just the glove compartment ripped open and her files scattered. She kept all case stuff in her home safe, so they got nothing, but it still rattled her. Then I noticed someone watching me at school, a man in a beige jacket sitting in a car across the street, twice. When I told Dana, she didn't blink, just said, "Keep your head down and keep your phone charged." That night she moved me into a friend's guest house out near the lake, said it was safer. Her friend was retired Army and had security cameras on every corner. It felt like hiding in plain sight. From there, I kept working. I digitized the notebook, the ledger, the flash drives. I made multiple backups. I sent one to Macy, one to Alvarez, one to a locked cloud account I didn't tell anyone about, just in case. Then came the call I wasn't expecting. Carlinda. She didn't give her name at first, just said I shouldn't trust everyone on the inside, that the ledger was only a partial list, that she used to help people until someone offered her money to look the other way. She said she refused, and that someone made sure she disappeared. She was calling from a payphone. She said she had proof, documents, photographs. She asked if I could meet her. I told Dana. She didn't want me to go, but I couldn't just let it go. This woman might have answers Grandpa never got, the ones he died waiting for. We met in a diner an hour from town. I wore a hoodie and sat in the back corner. Carlinda came in with sunglasses and a scarf around her neck, even though it was warm. She looked older than I expected. Then, quiet, she sat across from me and slid an envelope across the table. Inside were photos, scans, emails, handwritten notes. Some of them matched names in the ledger. Others were new. She told me there were at least 9 care homes involved, that money moved through dummy charities and fake grant programs, that the investors included people in state health offices and to politicians. She said she used to collect the reports herself, until one day, a man came to her door and told her to stop. She did, but she never threw anything away. Then she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "You aren't just fighting for your grandfather anymore. You're fighting for all of us who gave up too soon." I thanked her. She left without finishing her coffee. I never saw her again. That night, Dana and I went through every page. We found a list of offshore accounts, transfers, a chain of shell companies tied back to the main care corporation. The same one Green Pines belonged to. The next morning, Alvarez called. She said a federal task force had taken over, that our case was now part of a broader corruption probe, that things were going to move faster and messier. Then she said something else. She asked me to testify, not just for Grandpa, not just for the families, but for the bigger case. I said yes. The weeks that followed were a blur of court prep and meteor and whispered warnings. Ron got summoned again. Mom too. I saw them briefly at the courthouse. They looked like shadows of the people I used to know. Ron tried to speak to me. A guard stepped between us. I kept walking. The day I testified, I wore black. Not for drama, just because it made me feel solid. They asked me everything. From the first visit to Green Pines, to the notebook, to the break-in, to the ledger, to Carlinda, I answered without flinching. The judge thanked me when it was done. That meant more than I expected. Afterward, a woman in the gallery came up to me. She had gray hair and held a small photo of a man in a wheelchair. Her husband. He died last year at another home owned by the same company. She said she didn't have proof, but she knew. She just knew. Then she hugged me, tight, without words. That night I sat by the lake outside the guest house. The water was still, the moon bright enough to read by. I took out the notebook one more time, touched the corner of each page like it was a relic. I think Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing, leaving a trail, teaching me how to follow it. I was tired, but I wasn't done. I was tired, but I wasn't done. That's what I kept repeating to myself the morning the subpoenas widened. Alvarez called just after sunrise. Her voice had that clip urgency I now knew meant things were shifting again. She said the task force had traced 3 wire transfers from an account belonging to the Care Home Corporation to a consulting firm registered under an alias. The alias turned out to be Ron. It felt strange hearing his name again after so many weeks of pushing it down. I thought I'd be numb by now, but I wasn't. It still made my jaw tighten and my stomach twist. The money was moved just days before Grandpa's trust was rewritten. Dana stood next to me while Alvarez read off the amounts and dates like each one was a hammer striking something hollow and long buried. They arrested him the afternoon. I didn't go to watch. I thought I would. But when it actually happened, I couldn't. I stayed by the lake and stared at the ripples in the water like maybe if I focused hard enough I could undo the years that led to this. The lies, the slow unraveling of trust. The day Grandpa was taken away, the empty slippers in the plastic bag. I could still see them in my head like they were sitting at the foot of my bed. Mom wasn't arrested. Not yet. But Dana said it was only a matter of time. Her name appeared into many emails. She signed to many things. She couldn't play the helpless act forever. Part of me hated her. Part of me still wanted her to look at me the way she used when I was little and everything was warm and safe. But that part of me was shrinking. The trial dates were set. Federal court, multiple defendants, the care home chain, 3 former executives, Sutter, Ron, 2 administrators. The charges stacked like bricks. Fraud, conspiracy, manslaughter, elder abuse, obstruction. Dana showed me the full list on her laptop, and it scrolled down longer than a school essay. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Families of victims sat shoulder to shoulder. Some of them held photos. Others wore buttons with names. The press cameras weren't allowed inside, but they waited like vultures outside the doors. I sat near the front next to Dana and Joy and Alvarez. We were told not to speak, just listen. The prosecution started with the footage. The jury flinched, then the ledger, then the bank records. Then Carlinda's written statement. She didn't appear in person, said she didn't feel safe. I understood. Her voice still echoed in my head. They tried to attack me next. The defense lawyers said I had a vendetta, that a 16-year-old couldn't understand legal trusts or corporate structures, that I was manipulated, that I was grieving, that I was unstable. Dana stood, objected. The judge shut them down, said I had already been vetted by the court, said my testimony was valid and critical. I didn't look at Ron once. He tried to meet my eyes. I stared straight ahead. Mom wasn't in the room. She'd been called to testify but delayed for health reasons. I wondered if it was real or just convenient. Joy took the stand next. She was calm and direct. She described the patients, the sudden changes, the way records were overridden. She cried once, just once, when she said she wished she had spoken sooner. That moment stuck with everyone. Then came the others, a nurse who worked at a sister facility, a family member who found sedatives in his mother's drawer, a financial analyst who tracked the money through for different shell companies. The truth was loud now. Every night after court, I went back to the guest house and wrote everything down. Not for the trial, for myself, for Grandpa, for the box I would one day hand to someone else when they needed to understand how all of this happened, because it would happen again somewhere if no one stayed awake. On the 6th day of trial, the defense broke. One of the executives flipped. He pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentencing and agreed to testify against the others. He detailed meetings, internal memos, even named politicians who received donations in exchange for silence. His voice shook near the end. He said the whole business was built on dying people and no one wanted to admit it. The judge ordered more subpoenas. By the end of that week, 2 more arrests were made. A lobbyist, a former health department official, Alvarez looked exhausted, but determined. She told me this was bigger than she thought. Daner said I had started a domino chain they couldn't stop even if they wanted to. I still went to school, sort of. Some teachers let me skip homework. Others acted like everything was normal. I didn't blame them. How do you grade a test when a kid's dragging down a criminal empire before lunch? I started getting letters again, this time from strangers all over the country. A woman in Nevada whose father died in a care home where no one could explain the sudden bruises. A man in Georgia who found financial withdrawals after his grandmother passed. A teenager like me in Iowa who said my story made him finally speak out against his uncle who ran a home there. I kept every letter. The jury deliberated for 9 days. On the 10th, they read the verdicts. Guilty on almost every count. The judge sentenced Sutter to 22 years. The executives got between 15 and 25 depending on their roles. Ron got 12, with no chance of parole until at least 8. The chain was broken. The care homes placed under emergency oversight. The assets frozen. Investigation still ongoing. Mom was charged weeks later. Conspiracy and fraud. She took a deal, house arrest, probation, loss of her nursing license. I didn't visit. She didn't ask me to. After the dust settled, Macy published a full story. A long one, with every piece from beginning to end. She called it The Girl Who Wouldn't Stay Quiet. I hated the title at first. Then I read it. It wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who came forward. Everyone who stopped pretending things were okay. One night, Dana and I sat on the porch of the guest house watching the sun drop behind the lake. She asked what I wanted to do next. I said I didn't. No, I hadn't really thought about it. She smiled and said I should. Said this kind of courage doesn't just happen once. It's a muscle. And it's awake now. I looked out over the water and thought of Grandpa, of his voice, his eyes. The way he used to say the world was loud, but the truth was louder if you carried it right. And I had carried it. I had carried it. That was the last thing I said out loud that night before I went inside. And it stayed with me in the silence that followed. For the first time in what felt like years, the silence wasn't heavy. It was whole. I didn't check my phone. I didn't open the notebook. I just let myself sit in that quiet and breathe. School let out 2 weeks later. I passed everything. Barely. Some teachers sent notes. Some classmates sent messages. Most just kept their distance. Not out of cruelty, out of confusion. I had become a headline, and it's hard to talk to someone when you only know the version of them that went viral. I didn't mind. Dana told me the federal investigations were still growing. More names, more documents, more connections. She said, I had helped ignite a wave that was now being handled by people with real power. But every time she said that, I thought of Grandpa, sitting alone in that room with the peeling walls and the tray of food he never touched. That was where the real power started, right there. In the silence, in the refusal to give up, a letter came from Ron. He wrote it by hand, 6 pages. I didn't read it all. I skimmed the first paragraph, then folded it up and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't anger that stopped me, just clarity. Some things didn't need to be reopened. Some endings are clean even if they come from pain. Mom sent flowers. Then an email. She said she was sorry, that she didn't know how far things had gone, that she was scared and broken and believed Ron too easily. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to write back. But I didn't, at least not then. I wasn't ready to reopen that wound either. I still carried love for her somewhere, but it was deep now, tucked under layers I didn't know how to name. Joy moved out of town, said she needed a new beginning. She gave me a pair of earrings before she left, said they were from her mother, said I reminded her what it meant to care again. Macy's story got picked up nationally, then internationally. I saw my name in newspapers in languages I couldn't read. People started calling me an advocate, a whistleblower, but I was just a girl who listened when others did in single quotes. The trust fund Grandpa left me sat and touched for months. I didn't know what to do with it. Money felt strange after everything, like it was both a key and a curse. Then one night I had a dream. I was back in his room at Green Pines. The same broken clock, the same flickering light, only this time he wasn't in the bed. He was sitting by the window smiling at me. He didn't say anything, he just pointed outside. The next day, I talked to Dana. I told her I wanted to start something, not a business, a place, a real place, a house maybe, where kids like me could go when they were stuck between truth and fear. A place for stories to be told and documented and passed forward. She didn't hesitate, said she'd help me set it up legally, said we'd do it right. We called it the shelf, named after the top shelf where Grandpa hid the notebook, the place where everything started. It wasn't big at first, just a room in an old library and a couple of laptops. But people came, they brought files and questions and memories and silence. And we listened. Years passed. I grew up in the quiet of that work. Some days I missed the chaos. Most days I didn't. I started to speak at places I never imagined. Courtrooms, universities, once even in front of Congress. My voice still shook sometimes, but I didn't hide from it. One summer I went back to Green Pines. I had changed names, changed stuff, cleaned up its floors and painted its walls. A state-run agency had taken over. They invited me for a tour. I walked the halls slowly. The smell was different now. The windows were open, the rooms brighter. But in one hallway I stopped and closed my eyes. I saw Grandpa, just for a moment, sitting in the wheelchair by the nurse's desk, looking at me like he always did, sharp and soft and full of something that words can't hold. I whispered, "Thank you." Then I left. On the anniversary of the verdict, Dana and I lit a candle at the lake. We didn't speak, just sat with it. The wind moved through the trees like it was saying something too. I thought of everyone who had been lost before the truth came out, everyone who never got their stories told. And then I thought of Grandpa again, not in the bed or the chair or the photos, but in the notebook. In the way he thought ahead. In the way he trusted me. He couldn't escape the walls they put him in, but he made sure they couldn't escape the truth. And neither would I. Still keep the notebook by my bed, not because I need it, but because I remember what it felt like the first time I opened it. Like someone believed in me, like I wasn't alone, like the world wasn't as dark as they wanted me to think. I carried that feeling with me now. Always. Even in the quiet.